There are moments in life when we find ourselves desperate for a sign, longing for God to reveal His plan in a way that is undeniable. We pray, we wait, and we search, hoping for something dramatic, an unmistakable voice from the heavens, a miracle that leaves no room for doubt. But often the sign we are waiting for has already been given, hidden in the details of our daily lives. The problem is not that God isn't speaking, but that we aren't recognizing the ways in which He is already guiding us. God speaks in many ways, through His Word, through people, through circumstances, and even through silence. The challenge is that we often expect His signs to match our expectations. We look for something obvious, something loud, something impossible to ignore, but God is not confined to our limited way of thinking. He moves in ways that are beyond human understanding, and His signs are often subtle, requiring us to be spiritually attentive. Have you ever noticed how sometimes things don't go according to plan? You wanted that job, but the door closed. You thought a certain relationship was meant to be, but it ended. You planned for things to go one way, but life took a completely different turn. In those moments, it's easy to be frustrated and confused, wondering why things aren't working out. But what if that closed door was a sign? What if that unexpected shift was God protecting you from something or redirecting you to something even greater? Many times we mistake God's guidance for obstacles. We think He is silent when in reality He is answering us in ways we didn't anticipate. A delayed opportunity might be God's way of saying, "Not yet." A sudden change might be His way of saying, "I have something better." But when we are so focused on our own timeline and desires, we fail to see how God is moving on our behalf. Think about the moments in your life when things didn't go the way you expected, only for you to later realize that it was a blessing in disguise. Maybe you wanted to be in a certain place, but something prevented you from going, and later you saw how that delay saved you from harm. Maybe you were heartbroken over a loss, only to later discover that God had something far greater in store for you. His signs were there all along, but it took time for you to see them. The key to recognizing God's signs is surrender. Instead of demanding that He speaks in a way that suits us, we must trust that He knows what's best. When we let go of our insistence on how things should happen, we open our hearts to perceive the subtle ways He is guiding us. The delay, the redirection, the unexpected opportunities, these are all signs of His presence working things out for our good. He also speaks through people. Sometimes He places individuals in our lives to deliver a message, to encourage us, or to challenge us to see things differently. A conversation with a friend, a sermon, a random encounter. These moments are not coincidences. They are divine orchestrations, reminders that God is speaking even when we least expect it. One of the most powerful ways God speaks is through His peace. If you are facing a decision and you feel unsettled, that may be a sign that something is not aligned with His will. On the other hand, when you feel a deep sense of peace, even when the path ahead is uncertain, that is often God's way of confirming that you are on the right track. So the question is not whether God is giving you a sign. The real question is, are you paying attention? Are you willing to look beyond your expectations and see the ways He is already leading you? Because the truth is, His hand has been guiding you all along. What you've been waiting for might already be in front of you. You just need to open your eyes and recognize it. Sometimes the sign we are waiting for isn't something external. It's the transformation happening within us. We often think that God's signs are about changing our circumstances, moving obstacles, or opening doors. But what if the sign is the shift happening inside your heart? What if God is preparing you, molding you, and strengthening you before He moves in your situation? When we go through difficult seasons, we tend to ask God, why is this happening? Or when will things change? But what if God is saying, look at how I am changing you? Sometimes He allows certain struggles not to break us, but to shape us into the person who can handle the blessing He is about to give. He isn't just working on your situation, He is working on you. That feeling of restlessness, that urge to let go of something, that sense of discomfort, these are all signs that God is doing something within you. Think about the moments when you felt a deep shift, when you started feeling uncomfortable in places where you once felt at ease. Maybe you found yourself losing interest in certain conversations or realizing that the people around you were no longer aligned with where you're headed. That's not random. It's a sign. God is preparing you for a new season, and sometimes that means shedding old ways of thinking, letting go of certain relationships, or stepping into something unknown. Growth isn't always easy. In fact, it's often uncomfortable. But when you feel that discomfort, instead of resisting it, lean into it. Ask yourself, what is God teaching me? How is He stretching my faith? Because if you only focus on the external, you may miss the incredible work He is doing inside of you. Many times we wait for God to change things around us before we step forward, but the reality is He changes us first. He strengthens us before He places us in positions of responsibility. He humbles us before He elevates us. He teaches us patience before He brings the breakthrough. And that internal preparation is just as much a sign of His presence as any external shift. If you're feeling a pull in your spirit, if something inside you is telling you that you can't stay the same, that's a sign. Maybe you no longer find joy in the things that once excited you, or maybe you feel an undeniable push to move in a different direction. Don't ignore it. That's God stirring something in you, realigning your heart with His purpose. Sometimes the biggest sign that God is moving isn't a loud announcement. It's a quiet conviction in your heart that you can't explain, but you know it's real. It's the realization that you are outgrowing certain spaces, that your mindset is shifting, that your priorities are changing. When that happens, don't resist it. Embrace the transformation, because when God starts working inside of you, it's only a matter of time before you see the shift around you. So instead of just waiting for an external sign, start paying attention to what's happening within, because that restlessness, that discomfort, that unshakable feeling that something is about to change, that might just be the sign you've been waiting for. There are moments in life when things start shifting in ways we never expected. People we thought would always be there suddenly drift away. Opportunities we were counting on close before we can step into them. Plans we were sure of fall apart right before our eyes. And in those moments, it's easy to feel confused, frustrated, or even abandoned. But what if I told you that these moments are not coincidences? What if these are signs that God is working behind the scenes, moving things into place for something far greater than you can imagine? We often see closed doors as disappointments, but what if they are divine redirections? We pray for answers, but when things don't go our way, we assume something is wrong. What we fail to see is that God's plan is not always revealed in the way we expect. Sometimes He has to remove what is familiar to us so that He can lead us into something new. And in that process, it might feel like we are losing control, but the truth is, we were never meant to control everything in the first place. Think about the times in your life when you felt like you were being pushed out of a situation. Maybe you lost a job, but later realized that loss led you to something better. Maybe a relationship ended, but over time you understood that it wasn't meant to be. Maybe you had a dream that didn't work out, but it made room for an even bigger purpose. These moments of loss and uncertainty often feel painful, but they are also the moments when God is most at work, because when we lose what we thought we needed, we learn to trust that God is providing exactly what we truly need. The problem is we don't always recognize when God is shifting things. Instead of seeing His hand in the situation, we panic. We try to hold on. We try to force things back into place. But faith means surrendering. It means trusting that even when we don't understand, God is still in control. It means believing that if something is leaving your life, if something is shifting beyond your control, it's because God is making room for something new. When God starts shifting things, it can be uncomfortable. It can feel like everything familiar is being stripped away, but you have to understand that sometimes the only way to receive what God has for you is to let go of what is no longer meant for you. That relationship that ended, that opportunity that passed you by, that door that closed, it wasn't a mistake, it was a move of God. And here's the thing. When you start to recognize these shifts as divine interventions instead of obstacles, your perspective changes. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? You start asking, God, what are you making room for in my life? Instead of trying to hold on to what's leaving, you start preparing for what's coming. Instead of seeing change as a loss, you begin to see it as a step toward your destiny. God doesn't just shift things randomly, He shifts things intentionally. He removes people, places, and plans that no longer align with your purpose. He closes doors that would have led you in the wrong direction. He disrupts your comfort so that you can step into your calling. And the sooner you embrace that truth, the sooner you will walk into what He has prepared for you. So if things are shifting in your life right now, don't fight it. Don't resist what God is doing. Instead, trust that whatever is being removed is making space for something greater. Because when God is shifting things, it's always for your good. There are moments in life when everything seems to fall apart. The plans you carefully made crumble before your eyes. The people you trusted walk away. The opportunities you worked so hard for slip through your fingers. And in those moments, it's easy to feel like you're losing, like everything is working against you. But what if I told you that these moments are not signs of failure, but signs that something bigger is happening? What if these shifts are proof that God is setting you up for something greater? When you feel like you are being stripped of everything familiar, it is not because God has abandoned you. It is because He is preparing you. Think about it. When a tree is pruned, it looks bare for a season. Branches that once flourished are cut away. Leaves that once provided shade are stripped. But if you didn't know any better, you might assume that the tree is being destroyed. What you wouldn't see is that beneath the surface, new life is formed. The roots are growing deeper, the foundation is becoming stronger, and in time, the same tree that looked lifeless will bloom again, stronger and more abundant than before. This is exactly what happens in your life when God starts removing things. The relationships that didn't work out, the job that didn't last, the plans that didn't unfold the way you expected. It's not destruction, it's preparation. God is cutting away what is no longer needed so that you can grow into what He has called you to be. But in order to step into what's next, you must be willing to let go of what is no longer meant for you. When God says go, let go what is not. The problem is that we don't always see this in the moment. We see the loss, but we don't see the reason. We feel the pain, but we don't recognize the purpose. And because of that, we try to hold on. We try to keep people in our lives who were never meant to stay. We try to force situations to work that were never meant to last. We try to build our future around something that God is trying to remove. And in doing so, we delay our own progress. We hold on to the past so tightly that we have no room to receive the future. But here's the truth. What God has for you will never require you to hold on to something He is trying to take away. If you have to beg someone to stay, they are not meant to be in your life. If you have to force an opportunity to happen, it is not your opportunity. If you have to sacrifice your peace to keep something in place, then it was never built on the right foundation. God's plans for you will never be built on desperation. His plans will always be built on divine alignment. And that is why surrender is so important. Because faith is not about controlling the outcome. It's about trusting that even when you don't understand, God is leading you in the right direction. It's about believing that if something is being removed, it's because something better is on the way. It's about knowing that when God takes something away, it is never to leave you empty, but to fill you with something greater. Look back at your own life. Think about the times when you felt like you lost something, only to realize later that it was the best thing that could have happened to you. Maybe you didn't get the job you wanted, but you ended up finding a career that fulfilled you even more. Maybe someone you loved walked away, but their absence made room for someone who truly valued you. Maybe a door closed in front of you, but it forced you to walk through another door that led to something far greater. That is how God works. He sees what we cannot see. He knows what we do not know, and because of that, we must trust that even when we don't understand, He is still in control. We must trust that the same God who provided before will provide again. The same God who made a way in the past will make a way again. The same God who removed what wasn't for you is the same God who will bring what is meant for you. So instead of questioning why things are being removed, start preparing for what is coming. Instead of holding on to what is gone, start opening your heart to what is next. Because when you stop resisting and start trusting, you will begin to see that nothing was ever taken away from you. God was simply making space for what was meant for you. And when that new season arrives, you will look back and realize that everything had to happen exactly the way it did in order for you to step into the life God had waiting for you. Life often unfolds in ways we do not expect. One moment everything feels secure, predictable, and steady, and the next everything shifts. People walk away, opportunities fade, and circumstances force us into places we never imagined we'd be. It's in these moments that we feel lost, questioning what went wrong, wondering why things had to change. But what if I told you that the very things you see as losses are actually part of a greater plan? What if I told you that the setbacks you're facing are not punishments but redirections? God never removes anything from your life without a purpose. When you feel like you've lost something, it's not because He is depriving you, it's because He is making room for something better. But the problem is that we don't always see it that way. We see the absence, not the preparation. We focus on what is missing rather than what is being built. And because of that, we resist the process. We try to hold on to what God is trying to take away. We fight to keep doors open that were meant to be closed. We chase after people who have already left. We cling to the familiar because it feels safer than the unknown. But the unknown is exactly where God does His greatest work. When He removes something, it's not to leave you empty, it's to position you for something greater. Sometimes He must strip away what is comfortable so you can grow. He must take away what is no longer serving you so that you can step into what is meant for you. And if you refuse to let go, you will only delay your own blessings. You will hold on to what is broken instead of embracing what is whole. You will settle for less when God is preparing more. Look at your own life. Think about the moments when you lost something you thought you couldn't live without. Think about the heartbreaks, the disappointments, the unexpected turns. At the time, they felt like the end. But now, looking back, don't you see how they were necessary? Don't you see how they shaped you, how they led you to something better? That relationship that ended made way for someone who truly valued you. That plan that didn't work out redirected you to something greater than you ever imagined. Every single thing that was removed had to happen for you to step into the life you have now. That is how God works. He doesn't just take things away. He makes strategic moves that will place you exactly where you need to be, and that means you have to trust Him even when it doesn't make sense. You have to trust that if something is gone, it wasn't meant to stay. If a door closed, it wasn't your door. If someone walked away, they were never part of your destiny. Nothing that is truly meant for you will ever require you to beg, force, or fight to keep it. What God has for you will always find its way to you in the right time, in the right way. So instead of focusing on what is lost, focus on what is coming. Instead of chasing after what left, prepare for what's ahead, because the more you resist, the more you delay your own growth. But when you surrender, when you trust that God is leading you, even when you don't understand, you open the door to blessings that are beyond your imagination. God is never late. He is never mistaken. Every single move He makes is intentional. And when He removes something, it's always because He is preparing something greater. Your only job is to trust Him, to let go of the past so you can embrace the future, to stop clinging to what is gone and start walking forward with faith. Because what's ahead is far greater than anything you've left behind. And when you finally see what He has been preparing for you all along, you will understand why everything had to happen exactly the way it did. Life is full of moments where we are forced to make decisions that test our faith, our patience, and our willingness to trust in God's plan. Sometimes we find ourselves holding on to things, situations, and even people, thinking they are essential to our journey. But what if God is trying to remove them for a reason? What if the things we are clinging to are actually the very things that are keeping us from stepping into His best for us? My foot crunched down. Too often we become so attached to the familiar that we resist change, forgetting that God never removes anything without a purpose. When something is taken away from us, our first instinct is to question it. We wonder why things had to change, why a person walked away, why an opportunity slipped through our fingers. It is natural to feel this way, but what if, instead of questioning, we surrendered? What if, instead of resisting, we trusted that God knows exactly what He's doing? Because the truth is, God never takes away without replacing. He never allows a loss without preparing a gain. But that gain may not come in the way we expect, and it may not come in our timing, and that's where faith comes in. Faith is trusting that even when something is removed from your life, it is not a sign of abandonment, but a sign of alignment. It means that God is shifting things, rearranging circumstances, and positioning you for something greater. But if you keep looking back, if you keep holding on to what He's trying to remove, you will never be able to receive what He has for you next. You can't carry old burdens into new blessings. You can't walk into your future while dragging the weight of your past. You have to be willing to release, to let go, to trust. Think about all the times you've felt disappointed because something didn't work out the way you wanted it to. Now think about where you are today. How many of those disappointments actually led you to something better? How many closed doors redirected you to something greater? The problem is that in the moment, we don't always see it. We see what is lost, but we don't see what is being prepared. We focus on the absence, not the opportunity. But God sees the full picture. He sees what you cannot. He sees the relationships that are not meant for you. He sees the opportunities that will lead you astray. He sees the plans that, if left unchanged, would take you in the wrong direction. And so He removes, He shifts, He redirects. And sometimes those changes feel painful. They feel confusing. But one day you will look back and understand that it had to happen. You will see why that person had to walk away. You will see why that opportunity didn't work out. You will see why the delay was necessary. Because what God has planned for you is always bigger than what you can imagine. And if you settle for what's comfortable, this is why surrender is so important. Surrender is not about giving up. It's about giving in to God's will, to His timing, to His perfect plan. It's about realizing that you don't have to control everything because He is already in control. It's about understanding that when God removes something, it's not a punishment, it's preparation. It's an invitation to trust Him on a deeper level, to believe that He is working all things for your good. But trusting God doesn't mean that the process will always be easy. There will be moments of doubt. There will be moments where you question whether you made the right decision by letting go. There will be moments when you feel like nothing is happening, like the waiting is too long, like the silence is unbearable. But those are the moments when faith is built. Those are the moments when God is strengthening you, stretching you, preparing you for what's next. And what's next is always better. It may not look like what you expected. It may not come in the way you planned, but it will be exactly what you need, because God is not in the business of taking, He is in the business of transforming. And when He removes something, it's because He is making space for something greater. So don't fight what God is trying to do in your life. Don't resist the change. Don't cling to what He's telling you to release. Instead, trust Him. Trust that His plan is greater than your understanding. Trust that what He has ahead is better than what's behind. Trust that when He removes something, it's only because He is preparing you for something you cannot yet see. And when the time comes, when you finally step into that blessing, when you finally see what He was preparing you for, you will realize that everything you lost, everything you released, everything that changed, it was all worth it, because God's plan is always greater than our own. And when we trust Him fully, we will always find ourselves exactly where we are meant to be.